Hello, this is John Rankin with the TEI International, TEII.org. And this is TEI Online Class number 3. And here we define, or we introduce, the 12 positive assumptions in Genesis 1 through 2 that interpret, indeed, the whole Bible and all of human history. And as I indicated earlier, the subjects that we glean here cover all of the finest liberal arts education possible. The first assumption is that of God's nature. And this starts in Genesis 1:1, as we have already quoted at least a couple times. In the beginning, God, or literally from the Hebrew, Bereshit bara Elohim, in the beginning, Elohim. Elohim is a title of the Creator. Now, it is a masculine plural word, and in the view of many higher critical scholars going back 1.5 centuries, the thought was that this was a reflection of a prior polytheism that preceded quote-unquote Jewish monotheism. And this allowed them to look at religion as something evolving and not something that's necessarily revealed. However, this does not deal with the grammar of Elohim as it refers to Yahweh, and we'll talk about Yahweh's name here shortly. Elohim, in reference to Yahweh all the way throughout the Hebrew Bible, is, though a masculine plural, it is in the singular case. In other words, he, not they. And this is unique in all of ancient Near Eastern literature. The few times that Elohim, lowercase as it were, refers to the gods or the pagan gods, the context refers to the pagan gods and goddesses, and also in the plural case. But the overwhelming majority of the use of Elohim in the Hebrew Bible is for Yahweh Elohim. And Elohim in particular in Genesis 1 is the title of the one true Creator. And therefore what this leads to, and we'll unpack this, is that Elohim is greater than the concept of number, the God above all the so-called gods. And in Genesis 1, which is the grand design of creation, something that should be able to be understood by all Gentiles or all pagans, the title of the Creator is used, the God above all the so-called gods. So this is Elohim. This is the dynamic positive of the one who is the true Creator. Now, in Genesis 2, verses 4 and following, we begin with the name of Yahweh Elohim, and hence the introduction of Yahweh. So whereas Genesis 1 is the grand design, Genesis 2, in complement, occurring within the timeline of Genesis 1, is the first covenant between Yahweh and man and woman. And therefore the grand design is set in place, Elohim, the title of the Creator, and then the covenant between Yahweh Elohim and man and woman, and Yahweh is the name of the one true Creator. Now Yahweh is introduced to Moses, the name of Yahweh in Exodus 3 at the burning bush, and the calling that Moses has to go to Pharaoh and call for the people of Israel to be set free. And when God reveals himself to Moses, in the text it is Elohim who reveals himself, and Moses says, "What is your name?" He wants to know his name. And God says, Ehyeh, twice. And Ehyeh is the first person in the Cal Perfect of the verb to be, I am. And therefore, what God is saying is that he is divine existence, I am. Now, when he commissions Moses to bring the name of I am to the sons of Israel, what we have is Yahweh is the name that Moses uses, the third person of the verb to be, he is. I am, he is. And therefore, when we combine Yahweh Elohim together, Yahweh is the one who is greater than space and time, and Elohim the one who is greater than number. And therefore, in the very language of Yahweh Elohim, we have the only written concept, indeed the only one in human history identified, who is greater than space, time, and number. And this, of course, goes back to my conversion, wondering where the universe ends. We cannot conceive of a universe in time and number that ends or not ends. And the one who is greater than all of that is Yahweh Elohim. Now, in the Gospel of John, begins in John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. And one way in which it is demonstrated that the Word, that is Jesus, is God, is that Jesus at least 30 times in the Gospel calls himself ego eimi, I am. This is the translation from the Greek Septuagint, which is the translation of the Hebrew Bible in the 4th century BC. And ego eimi is a translation of ehia. So, when Jesus says in the face of his enemies at the end of John 8, before Abraham was, I am, he says ego eimi. He doesn't say Yahweh. He doesn't say before Abraham was, he is. So he's not speaking of Yahweh from a third-person perspective the way we do as human beings, but rather he declared himself to be ehia. Ehia only used twice in the entire Hebrew Bible in Exodus 3, and then given to us to speak the name Yahweh. So this is why his enemies picked up stones to kill him for blasphemy. He was claiming to be ehia, from our perspective, Yahweh Elohim in the flesh. And so what we have in Genesis is the only positive definition of the Creator and the name of the one true Creator in all of history. The second positive is the good of politics. And we have indicated this already in terms of Genesis 1:1. Bereshit bara Elohim eth hashamayim ve'eth ha'eretz. In the beginning, Elohim created the heavens and the earth. As we unpack Scripture, we discover that the heavens is the physical domain of Yahweh Elohim when he comes into the creation, where he reigns with his holy angels or his heavenly court, and he governs. And all government comes from that point forward. And therefore, when man and woman are made in the very image of God, we are made to govern this good creation he has given to us. Therefore, we have divine politics and human politics. The rest of the Bible follows that theme until Jesus returns as the King of Kings and Lord of Lords at the end of Revelation. And so our stewardship with the gospel is to know how to govern and to govern wisely, fairly, justly, and with mercy toward all. This leads to the third positive assumption, and that is the nature of the heavenly court. We trace this all the way throughout Scripture, and this we will do. In other words, within the heavens and Yahweh Elohim governing, he's got his holy angels. They are there by volition as well. They are free to accept or reject God's good nature, and Lucifer rejects it. Lucifer raises himself up to be greater than God. We will talk about that as we proceed. But the point is that we have the heavenly court. The angels were meant to serve those who are made in the image of God. Satan, the former Lucifer, violates that, not to serve man and woman as image bearers of God, but to usurp our authority. And hence the whole agenda throughout Scripture is for Satan to usurp political authority to trample man and woman. A theme we will talk about called sorcery at the right hand of power. But at the beginning, the angels are given to be good, but they're also made free, as are we, and we'll talk about that momentarily. The fourth positive is that of communication. So Elohim said, "Let there be light," and there was light. The nature of honest communication is revealing what is, not what isn't. So light, revelation, communication, these themes interface all the way throughout Scripture. And the communication of the one true Creator is honest, transparent, and accountable. And so we too, as image bearers of God, need to be exactly the same way. The fifth positive is that of human nature. So we are declared in Genesis 1:26-28 to be made in the very image of God. Male and female, he created them. When we unpack the language, it is dynamic for the equality and complementarity of man and woman found nowhere else in all of history, in all the pagan literatures, and obviously within the godless assumptions of atheism, you're not going to find the same thing, or secular humanism. In the pagan worldviews, man and woman are byproducts and slaves to enslaving deities. But no, here in Genesis, which precedes and defines all that is good, we are made in the very good image of God to reflect in our finite human natures his infinite goodness. So all our creativity, all our stewardship, all our loves, everything we seek to do comes from him, and as we honor him, we are fulfilled in them, and he rejoices in our fulfillment because we are made in his image. The sixth positive is that of human freedom, and this is the centerpiece of my work across all the years. What we have in Genesis 2:16, and when we get there we will unpack the details, is the only positive definition of freedom in all of human history. In other words, God sets before us an unlimited menu of good choices to eat from, with one prohibited fruit which is poisonous. To eat that fruit is to deny God and to poison ourselves. Therefore, the very nature of freedom to begin with is not an imposition. All the pagan deities impose slavery upon us. Yahweh, who is free, gives us freedom. But is Yahweh Elohim free to do evil? No, because to do evil, as the text will show, is to become a slave to it. Therefore, you and I, made in God's image, if we were forced to be free, we would be slaves. That is an oxymoron. Therefore, the very love and power of the sovereign Yahweh is to give us the freedom to accept or reject his goodness. And when we reject it, he parts heaven and hell and comes to us in Jesus to redeem us and restore us to that freedom. So the only positive definition of freedom in history is a freedom for the good. When we do the good, we are free and we continue to live in freedom. So therefore, freedom is a power to do the good. Slavery is the folly of doing the evil. And in every religion, in terms of its origin sources and secular humanism, apart from the Bible, the highest aspiration is a freedom from evil, because that's their starting point of what they understand existence to be. And so, for example, this is what we have in Buddhism, which started off as an ethical protest against the caste system in Hinduism. But yet Buddhism, without a rootedness in the good creation and the good resurrection, you sum up the entire religion as suffering is. And the highest hope, like in Hinduism, is to escape suffering, but not to an individual identity and a creative understanding of what it means to be made in God's image. So the image of God is yearning to be free from suffering in this life. We all want that. Freedom from is good, but freedom for what? What is the freedom leading us to? The power, the interpretive power we have in Genesis 1 and 2 is freedom for the good. Number 7 is the power to love hard questions. Throughout the entire scriptures, we are free to ask God our toughest questions, our leaders, and one another. And this is the epitome of freedom. We are not restricted in what we can say, think, and do, and even take risks. This is the level playing field that we have in Genesis 2, where God gives us true definitions of terms. This is good, this is evil, this is freedom, this is slavery, this is life, this is death. And only when we're free to ask questions to learn that do we really grasp what is true and beautiful. And therefore, throughout the entire Bible, this thesis of the power to love hard questions is everywhere, and it is the first exhibition in my mind of what freedom is all about. Adam and Eve were made to be in the presence of Yahweh Elohim, and as they learned, the childlike wonder of asking questions and learning, polluted by sin, but redeemed in Jesus. Number 8 is that of human sexuality. Man and woman are made for each other, and the end of Genesis 1, the end of Genesis 2 brings us together. Every pagan religion, the gods and goddesses are sexually promiscuous and violent, beat up on each other, and they beat up on us. But what we have for human sexuality in Genesis 1 and 2 is the fact that in the covenant of marriage, we have complete and unbroken trust. Once that trust is broken, which is what happens in Genesis 3, then all human suffering follows. And therefore, the two become one is ultimately imitation of the three who become one. And this is why all the way throughout the Hebrew Bible, to be faithless to Yahweh is to be fornicating, to be an adulteress, leaving the one true husband with Israel as the bride. Then we come into the New Testament and Jesus as the husband and the church as the bride, far deeper than human grasps of human sexuality. all meant to understand the powerful reality of the Trinitarian nature of God, the three who are one. In other words, it is unity that allows diversity, not unity for the sake of diversity. So what we have in Trinitarian Christianity is the three who become one. That is, we have diversity in service to unity. In Islam, where it's one God with no associates, you have unity without diversity, and this leads to totalitarian power. In polytheistic religions, beginning with Hinduism, for example, you have diversity all by itself. You have the many, and it leads to chaos, and it does not lead to freedom. If we want political freedom, it is diversity in service to unity. That begins with the Trinitarian understanding of God and human sexuality. The two becoming one and being faithful to each other is central to that. Number 9 is science and the scientific method. Science, from the Latin scientia, simply means knowledge. And science, in the modern sense of the word, is observable knowledge. The entire basis of Scripture is observing what is there accurately. There's no mythology. Everything is in comport with scientific observation, and indeed also the foundation for the scientific method, the principle of falsification, that in order to test something, if we're doing a test and in one variable the test is wrong compared to a hypothesis, we go back and start all over again. The ethics for that are in the law of Moses, which we will see. Number 10 is the assumption of verifiable history. Everything in Scripture, beginning in Genesis 1 and 2, and particularly in Genesis 2, with the specificities for Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, is based on what? It's based on multiple eyewitness history. 2 or 3 to testify to something that is true in a court of law, but everything is based on eyewitness history, nothing that is beyond the realm of being able to be tested, whether in science or in history. The number 11 is covenantal law. Covenant is the opposite of totalitarianism. And so we have 3 choices in terms of politics and human history. Covenant, where Yahweh, who's eternal and good, treats us at a level of equality of worth, where he makes good promises and keeps the good promises and expects us to do the same thing, beginning in the covenant of marriage on outward to the whole polity. Now that is covenant. The other 2 choices in history are oligarchy, where families aggregate power and basically rule over others. And then totalitarianism, which is where, like a king, like Pharaoh, where one person or a small group of people around one person will rule and dominate all others. And in oligarchy and in totalitarian power, or hierarchy, more properly defined, those underneath the oligarchical and hierarchical powers are not equals, and therefore they ultimately become slaves. And the only basis for covenantal freedom is Genesis 1, 2, and following. And finally, a positive view of unalienable rights. Now, this is a subcategory to politics, but worth identifying here, because the unalienable rights that we have of life, liberty, and property / pursuit of happiness in the United States, going back to the Declaration of Independence and the 5th and 14th Amendments, comes from the Creator, as declared in the Declaration of Independence. And these are good and they are given. But notice that in a broken world, the best that could be used by Thomas Jefferson in penning the Declaration of Independence was a double negative. Those rights that cannot be taken away by government, and that's good. But the positive in the order of creation is we don't have to worry about anyone taking our rights away. They are given and they are to be enjoyed. So upon these 12 positive assumptions, Scripture and life is most healthily interpreted. And this is the conclusion of TEI Online Class 3. Thank you and God bless.